Okay, now.
Okay.
So please go ahead, Dean Sonobe.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, or good morning, and good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to ADBI Distinguished Speaker Series. I'm Tetsushi Sonobe, Dean and CEO of ADBI. Today, we are very happy to welcome Professor Junho Lee. Professor Lee is a chairperson and CEO of Education Commission Asia. He is also a commissioner of the International Commission on Financing the Global Educational Opportunity, chair of the Education Workforce Initiative, and a non-resident senior fellow at Brookings Institution. He is famous for his education reform endeavors. He was a member of the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea from 2004 to 2008. He served as Senior Secretary to the President for Education, Science, and Culture. In 2009, he became a Vice Minister of Education, Science, and Technology, and from 2010 to 2013, he served as Minister of Education, Science, and Technology. After his 9-year service in the Korean Parliament and government, he returned to academia in 2013 as a professor of the KDI School of Public Policy and Management to resume actively his research on human capital and innovation policies, covering a wide range of issues such as 21st century skills, the fourth industrial revolution and learning revolution, education workforce design, innovation ecosystem, and government reform. He has written many articles and books, including Human Capital and Development, Lessons and Insight from Korea's Transformation, which was published in 2018 from Edward Elgar, and Positive Changes, the Education, Science and Technology Policies of Korea, which was published in 2012. He received his BA and MA degrees from Seoul National University and his PhD in economics from Cornell University in 1990. I'm very pleased to learn that he is a very good friend of Deputy Dean of ADBI, George Kim. Today, Professor Lee will give us a presentation entitled Moving Forward with High-Touch, High-Tech Education in the Post-COVID-19 World. But before embarking on, I would like to ask Deputy Dean George Kim to add something to my welcome remark and serve as the master of ceremony. DD Kim, please.
Thank you very much, the Dean. So indeed, very generous to give me opportunity to speak something, because I have strong working relationship with Junho. So as Dean mentioned, Junho Lee has had very extensive experience and also very impressive achievement in academia, in government side and parliament, and also the international, the corporations. So I think it is a very good opportunity to hear from him on the education reform in regard to COVID-19 situation. On a personal note, I had the honor to work under him when he was in the president's office to take charge of education reform, science, and technology. Also, I am a 3-year junior in high school in Korea. In Korea, also similar to Japan, in Korean context, high school senior is very, very, special relation. So in that sense also, I'm very happy, to have him to give this wonderful the lecture. So without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Lee to give a lecture. Please.
Thank you, Dean Sonobe and Deputy Dean Chulju Kim for your very nice and warm welcome and introduction. I am really honored to give a lecture in front of ADB leaders and researchers and other participants. My talk today is on moving forward with high-touch, high-tech education in the post-COVID-19 world. Next, please. Next, please. So I first talk about first the previous one, please. I will I will first talk about first industrial revolution and educational challenges, and then move on to talk about global learning crisis and the role of edutech in the time of COVID-19, and highlight moving forward with high-touch, high-tech education in detail, and conclude with consensus building and global action. Next, please, Yoko-san. Next, yeah, thank you. So South Korea has leapfrogged in third industrial revolution, the industrial revolution of computer and internet, but is now facing daunting challenges in fourth industrial revolution, that of AI and big data. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So South Korea has achieved both sustained economic development and democracy, mainly thanks to its investment in people. If you look at the left-hand side, Korea's per capita GDP increase showed very sustained and high growth rate compared to other Asian countries. And this very good economic performance paralleled with the very rapid increase in enrollment rates in education. So on the right-hand side, you can see that the enrollment rate of the elementary schooling has radically increased in 1950s. And then the lower secondary has followed suit in a very rapid way. And then high secondary education. And lastly, the higher education also raised very quickly. So this is a good example of progressive universalism, because we first universalized basic education, 9 years of education for everyone, regardless of wealthy or poor, and then moved on to provide high school education for almost everyone, regardless of economic background. And we also then moved on to increase higher education. And now according to the UNESCO statistics, every year of schooling in Korea, South Korea, is number 2, just next to New Zealand. So Korea has attained very rapid the increase in enrollment in a very similar way that we have achieved a very rapid increase in GDP per capita. Next slide, please, Yoko-san. So teachers were at the heart of the remarkable performance of Korean students. Left-hand side slide shows that the proportion of top 5% students aspiring to become teachers, according to PISA 2015, was the highest, with the very big margin to the next country. So in Korea, teacher is the best job for the youths. They really want to become teachers, maybe ahead of doctors or professors. And the right-hand side shows that the students, every scores of reading, math, and science has been on the top in PISA, like Japan and Hong Kong. Next slide, please. Yoko-san, yeah. So the education system geared toward mass production system. I say mass production because you know that regardless of students' potentials and abilities, we provide the standardized lecture to students in the classroom. It's more like a factory in the second and third industrial revolution. So that's what I call a mass production system in education. And because all education system was geared toward mass production system, so that really dropped students' happiness as well as teachers' self-efficacy. So although Korea is on the top in the traditional learning model, but it turned out that students are not happy in the classroom and teachers are losing self-efficacy despite high salaries. Next slide, please, Yoko-san. And this problem in education is also replected in the discontents of industries about education. And recent report by Seoul National University professors in engineering school, they showed that across all industries, including car making to shipbuilding, the major weakness of the Korean industry is lack of the ability of conceptual design. So although Korea is probably #1 in making good products, according to the blueprints possibly made by others. So it's not, the Korean industries are not really able to make a design, original design. So that is also related to the problems in education in South Korea. Students are encouraged to give answers to a question designed by others, made by a teacher. They are not encouraged to give a question, original question. So that is, I mean, the basic challenges that South Korea has in fourth industrial revolution. So next slide, please, Yoko-san. Another challenges in education in South Korea is that universities is not becoming central hubs of innovation ecosystem as other advanced countries which has a high performance in early stage of fourth industrial revolution. So the university should play a role as a central hubs so that corporations, companies can collaborate with university professors, scholars from academia, but it's really not active in Korean university. Next slide, please. So this also shows that one of the critical feature of fourth industrial revolution is that it requires a virtuous cycle between knowledge economy and commercial economy. And knowledge economy especially includes R&D, investment, and fundamental breakthroughs, technological breakthroughs, but this is still very weak in Korea. Next slide, please. Another problem facing Korea is that, you know, that in the innovation ecosystem, every country has a problem of value of death. You know that there is a high risk involved in technology demonstration and development. So it's really not easy for small business, startup companies to find those who can invest in for their product and so forth. And so the most important way to narrow the gap and bridge the valley of death, the valley of death, is to make academia and industry closely working together, but it's not happening yet in South Korea. Next slide, please. This is also another interesting diagram showing that basic research in the fourth industrial revolution era should serve as a platform to fuel the whole innovation ecosystem, so that the basic research and applied research and engineering and development are all interacting with each other in different stages. But because of the lack of strong partnership between universities and industries, it's not really been active in South Korea. Next slide, please. Another interesting feature of Korean human capital development is that the competencies in literacy, numeracy, and problem solving, according to the PIAC data, shows that Korean adults' competencies are rapidly declining with ages. So Korean youths are regarded to have a very high competencies, but their competencies has been declining with ages. So in the middle age, they are maybe around average, but after that, they become below average. Next slide, please. So these whole issues show that we really need a change, radical change in education in the era of fourth industrial revolution. But it maybe boil down to the two major issues. One is what to teach, and second is how to teach. So we really have to think about a fundamental way to reform in what to teach and how to teach. So maybe the knowledge, understand and remember the knowledge is the basics of education, but we really have to move to the upper level to learn more about data literacy, technological literacy, human literacy. You know that the literacy in the maybe in 20th centuries just to write, read, and calculate, but the literacy in the fourth industrial revolution should include data literacy, technological literacy, and human literacy. And on top of that, the future generation should have forces, creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. So we really have to teach a lot more in the fourth industrial revolution. Next, please. And how to teach is also very, very important. And we really have to think about radical change in how to teach. My suggestion is the change from mass production to mass personalization. So learn to test is, the test is basically a standardized test, right? So learn to test is just kind of a mass production way of learning, but it should be changed to learn to learn. And shallow learning, just based on memorization and understanding, should be moved to deep learning to include analyze, evaluate, and create. And vertical learning is based on lectures that is delivered to all students regardless of their potentials and abilities. It should be changed to horizontal learning so that students are encouraged to learn together and learn from each other, and maybe to do something together to create something new. Next, please. So let me move on to the second topic. COVID-19 is aggravating the global learning crisis. So the global learning crisis has far predated this pandemic. The Education Commission estimates that 825 million, roughly half of the young generation today, are expected to reach adulthood without the skills they need to thrive in the labor market and society. So remote learning serves as the only option for more than 1.5 billion students still out of school. with critical concerns regarding the further exacerbation of learning gaps. So the reliance of online learning platforms is particularly divisive, even more so than offline learning. So that efforts must be made so that even those from disadvantaged backgrounds are not lagging behind or left out completely. Next, please. With remote learning and imperative, this crisis is unveiling an opportunity to decipher the merits and demerits of online learning vis-a-vis offline learning. This experience subsequently serves as a springboard for developing blended learning system, regarded to be a more ideal learning model. For this transformation toward blended learning to succeed, effectively trained and competent human capital, especially teachers, and other systemic features like a robust policy environment, appropriate infrastructure must be in place. Next slide, please. So, yeah, next, yeah. So, so let me talk about the main part of this lecture, moving forward with high-touch, high-tech education. And one of the most promising blended learning model is high-touch, high-tech education initiative. The HTHE approach features a personalized education experience through an AI-assisted adaptive learning system that reduces the burden of teachers, thereby allowing them to focus on individualized, active, and higher order learning for students. Next, please. So we can define high-touch, high-tech as teachers provide more personalized guidance through software-informed data and active learning experiences focused on higher order and soft skills. This change of role of teachers should be supported by high-tech, which is the AI-assisted adaptive learning technology, provide instruction tailored to individual learning levels and needs, allowing students to progress at their own pace. Next, please. So this pyramid could be quite familiar with you because this is very widely known Bloom's taxonomy, right? The students first learn to remember and learn to understand. And based on what they understand and remember, they learn to apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. But in most of the classroom, teachers are not able to move upward. Just they stop teaching students how to understand and remember because of the mass production system, they cannot provide students the personalized experience. So, but if you embrace new technologies like adaptive learning system, then maybe you can ask machines, softwares to teach students how to understand and remember, and teachers and professors can focus on apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. So that's the division of roles between AI-assisted adaptive learning system and teachers with high-touch learning. Next, please. So technology alone is not enough. Well-trained teachers who can fully utilize artificial intelligence in classrooms are at the core of high-touch, high-tech learning. Evidence is starting to emerge that combining adaptive learning technologies with tailored support by teachers could have great potential and provide customized learning at scale. High-touch high-tech uses the adaptive and personalized learning software to help students learn and understand knowledge while teachers provide individual attention to each student based on data the system generates and focused on active learning and higher order skills. Next, please. So a lot of research shows that teaching at the right level consistently improves learning outcomes. Adaptive learning technology tailors the learning experience for students, developing on their progress and behavior in real time. Technology allows for scalability in the provision of personalized adaptive learning so that there can be a shift from mass production to mass personalization. Next, please. So maybe you can conceptualize high-touch high-tech in quadrant diagram. So maybe we can move on to the next slide to see how we can move toward high-touch high-tech. Next slide, please. So you know that many countries will find themselves in the low-touch, low-tech quadrant, but spurred by the surge in online learning due to COVID-19, some will rise to the challenge and inch towards the low-touch, high-tech quadrant, and then to ultimately progress to the high-touch, high-tech quadrant, proactive efforts must be made for sustainable and systemic changes. Next slide, please. So there has been already some high-touch, high-tech in action. The Education Commission is partnering with select countries, academic institutions, and tech thought leaders to test the applicability and adaptability of high-touch, high-tech learning in diverse contexts. Alex, for example, in ASU, more than 65,000 students have benefited from Alex in 12 basic courses. And MindSpark in India also showed a significant improvement on test scores. And STAT initiative in United States, this is the Baltimore, the school district program, and they adopt the adaptive learning system for more than 175 schools and more than 100,000 students. Next, please. Next slide, please. So maybe I can conclude with, sorry, right. So maybe I can talk more about high touch, the role of the transforming role of teachers. The crisis has revealed the critical role that teachers play, not only as agents of knowledge delivery, but also as facilitators of human connection and interpersonal learning. Utilizing adaptive learning software for much of the content-driven teaching allows teachers to focus on providing the human touch component necessary for a holistic learning experience. Going forth, it will be important to thoroughly consider the role differentiation between the adaptive learning technology and teachers to ensure an equitable, scalable, high-touch, high-tech experience. Next slide, please. So high-tech is, the edutech industry has made immeasurable progress within the last 15 years. Still, more concerted efforts are needed to develop the appropriate infrastructure for affordable, accessible, and convenient high-tech to be realized in all contexts. Next, please. Next, yeah. So let me conclude with consensus building and financing for tangible progress. So the global community must come together to swiftly respond to the most pressing needs of the crisis, while simultaneously addressing the long-standing gaps in the system as a whole. Champions must make conscientious efforts to build a consensus-backed support from both public and private actors. Next slide, please. So I also belong to one of the interesting groups of the groups of former education ministers called Trans Group, and we regularly meet before the COVID-19, and we made a suggestion from former minister to current minister about the education technology policies. And there are four major suggestions we made. First one, ministers should prioritize evidence-getting tested schools, and by keeping themselves updated about other initiatives across the world. Support teachers by listening to their needs and training them adequately to use learning technology. Make sure that the right products are reaching the market by publishing clear purchasing guidelines. Fourth, they should make learning technologies part of their wider education strategy by setting a cross-sector task force. More than 20 former education ministers across the world, we often and made a consensus that the EduTech is the most important agenda for the current ministers. So we decided to give some recommendation from former ministers to current ministers. And these four recommendations, we have made an absolute consensus. So maybe this could be a good recommendation for current ministers. Next slide, please. And another, effort made globally is the Education Commission, which was established in 2015, and the Gordon Brown, the former UK minister and current UN Special Envoy for Global Education, he chaired this Education Commission, and there are more than 25 global leaders joining in this commission, including me, and from Japan, we have a fellow commissioner, and also Mayor of Tokyo, the Madam Akike is also on the commission. And another commission is the Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, and the recently retired. But there are many other leaders, not just from East Asia, but around the world, to discuss and help the educational changes for all children in the world. Next slide. Next slide, please. So Education Commission has published a report titled The Regulation. And then we had initiated the International Finance Facility for Education to guarantee the 8 billion in new financing for education, because we saw that education is so important, and globally, the investment in education, we are lacking global investment in education. So, we also started a new initiative titled Education Workforce Initiative, and where I'm chairing for this initiative for more than 3 years. And next slide, please. So, also the Education Commission started to have regional hubs, and Education Commission Asia was established recently, and it's located in Seoul, Korea. So I hope Education Commission Asia can work closely with ADBI to enhance education opportunities for especially children in Asian regions. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So, like Vietnam project I will talk about, the Education Commission project is designed and implemented at 3 different levels: global level, national level, and ground level. So, one of the advantages of Education Commission is we can really try a new project at 3 different levels, so that we can have a much bigger impact globally. Next slide, please. So, one interesting initiative I will share the experience with you is Vietnam High-Tech prototype, the project. And I also talked about this initiative in January when I visited ADB in Manila, Philippines, and you know that we started 4 schools for a 7th grade math course in Vietnam using an adaptive and active learning approach, and it turned out to be quite amazing. We had a very good result. Soon be shared publicly, but preliminarily I can share the result that those who've been treated in the new learning experiment showed a very high increase in their math scores, about 0.5 standard deviation, which is almost equivalent to 2 years of learning gaps. So education, yeah. So the next and next. Yeah, the education questions. The project we can learn globally, so we can also turn big ideas into a global action. So we can first start small and test what works, and then create national networks to nurture a vibrant ecosystem, and then create a demonstration case for adaptation regionally or in additional countries and regions, and finally help establish a global network that invests. That's our goal. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, although the challenges brought forth by COVID-19 are many, it presents a unique opportunity for countries to leapfrog into more innovative, equitable, and sustainable modes of learning. How discerningly we choose to act now, to cope, to rebuild, and to newly create will determine the educational landscape following the waiting and for many years now. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lee, for your presentation. And before I open the Q&A round, I'd like to ask 3 questions which I received from the audience. The first question is on competencies, and whether your slide on competency possibly hides rising competency levels in youth age groups. And so the question is about how the data was gathered and what period on the decline that we observed for competencies after youth. Second question about the challenges that Hoover University face in regards to the education system that you're thinking about. And finally, do you think the PISA methodology needs to be adjusted in terms of the HT? Thank you.
What is the third question?
So do you think the PISA methodology needs to be adjusted onto HT?
Yeah. Okay. So do you want me to answer these 3 questions first?
Yeah, please answer these 3 questions.
Okay,
We'll Q&A round, and I'll encourage people to use the hand raise sign at the bottom of your screen.
Okay. For the questions, the question number 1 is I think about the data gathered by PR. You know that the OECD has a very good data set called PISA. They from 2000 they collect the data of student competency at the age of 15 across all the member countries in OECD, and later they started to collect PISA data. It's not just the 5 to 15-year-old students; it includes all the ages within countries that they collect data from. So I utilize this PISA data and compare these competencies. They actually surveyed competency data by knocking on the door and making the surveyee to complete the test in 30 minutes or something, and take data of competencies across all the ages. And so we can utilize the PISA data provided by OECD, and that's how we show the diagram showing the surprising result that Korean adults, their competencies has been declining very rapidly compared to other countries. And the second question about challenges facing government and universities. I think the fourth industrial revolution really requires a new ecosystem where government, universities, and industries should collaborate in a much deeper sense. So you know that Korea, once known as a country with very close collaboration between university and government, but major problem is it's more like a vertical government orders controls universities rather than encouraging universities to become more entrepreneurial and more innovative without the tight control of the government. So maybe this kind of a paradigm shift is required to design a new ecosystem where universities can become a central hub of an ecosystem, and where the government, rather than controlling and making orders, they should provide or they should nurture the ecosystem, not rather than tightly controlling them. That is a big challenge. It's not easy to move to the new system, shift the old paradigm, but it is really important agenda. And third one, about the need for a change in PISA test. I fully agree that the PISA test is not really complete in the sense that although they really work hard to test the competency to analyze, apply, and create, but you know that the typical standardized test, the problems of statistics, it's really hard to test the ability to analyze, create. So you know that it's not just problem of PISA test, but all the tests. So maybe a assessment system that can be provided by AI-assisted algorithm should be more often used than the typical standardized test. So I don't know. I mean, the OECD can make a lot of efforts to design a new ways of test, but more important, each country should think about introducing AI-assisted adaptive learning system instead of relying on globally standardized tests. That's my answer.
Okay, thank you very much for very comprehensive answers. I already have one question from the audience, and as I said, please raise your hand by the hand sign at the bottom of your screen. So first question by Mar Sophia. So go ahead, Mar.
Thank you very much.
Hello?
Yes, do you hear me?
We don't seem to be able to hear you. Okay, so we'll try to come back to Mar afterwards. And we found another question from the audience, which asks about the challenges for developing countries, right, of the need for technological innovation to adopt this type of HD system. So outline what they can do.
Yeah, you know that as I showed in my slide, you know that the gaps in online learning is more divisive than gaps in offline learning, particularly because of the divide in infrastructure for online learning. Infrastructure for more advanced online learning needed for the advanced learning or blended learning like high tech is more complicated. It should have much better internet connectivity networks. Right? So number one, network. Number two, students have better digital devices. So number two is devices. The third, learning platforms that could embrace AI technologies, learning management systems much more advanced than that of 10 or even 5 years ago. It's really been rapidly progressing. And contents. So contents, the platforms, the devices, and networks, these are all necessary for good online learning. So it's really more challenging than they have in traditional learning. But you know, if developing countries cannot embrace these new ways of learning, the divide between developing and developed countries in learning should be becoming much larger in the future, especially after COVID-19, where we need more learning online. Right? So that's why I'm calling for international collaboration to help developing countries to build up those infrastructures needed for online learning more quickly. Device networks can be provided globally through the help of global companies as well as global. We really have to work together to provide much better infrastructure and connectivity, and also that students all have good digital devices so that they can learn online. That's really the daunting challenges and imminent needs for developing countries' children. So we really need a strong leaders in this area. Otherwise, I can see much wider gap between developing and developed countries in education and learning.
Okay, thanks very much. Now Peter Moore has a question. Go ahead, Peter.
Yes, thank you much for very stimulating presentation. Earlier on, we were talking about the issue specific to Korean education, maybe Asian education, more generally about the lack of conceptual, or lack of emphasis on conceptualization. Then you kind of moved on to high touch, high tech, and online education. I'm just wondering, to what extent is the objective of high touch, high tech to just deliver the kind of current set of skills more efficiently, or actually aiming at trying to change the kinds of skills that come out of
it? Very good question. You know that as a minister, I really worked hard to change the Korean education system to embrace a new age of learning, especially the high-touch learning, encouraging project-based learning, encouraging teachers to connect to students individually and so forth. But I found out that it is really not easy because teachers are much more burdened when government asks them to move forward. So what I found is that we really have to relieve the burden from teachers. And I found out that new technologies, AI-assisted systems, maybe intelligent tutoring systems or adaptive learning systems can really effectively reduce the burden of teachers, especially from the burden of delivering the knowledge. So that's why I put high touch before high tech. We introduced high tech because we really want to help teachers to change the roles. So my priority is rather on high touch because maybe you all agree that especially in Asian region, we have been suffering from the problems of rote learning and learning based on memorization and test taking. And if we really want to move from this traditional way of learning towards more focused on analyzing, evaluating, and creating, we really have to embrace AI technology.
Okay, thank you very much. So now I have a question from Linda Arthur. Linda, please go ahead.
Thanks, John, and thank you, Professor, for your presentation today. As one of your final steps in the process, you mentioned identifying an investment network. Could you perhaps share with us some examples of who or what you have identified, what meaning institutions perhaps, as potential investors to promote this learning system?
Yeah, I think the many feel the necessity of changes in the rapidly integrated learning system, what I call the mass production learning system. It failed many students. It failed many teachers because of the the problems related to the traditional learning models. So many agree that we really need rapid change, but it requires global collaboration, and also it requires global investment. So maybe we have ADB and World Bank and other regional banks. Maybe we can work together to help innovators to go further. And also we can bring in global companies who really want to have those new kind of manpower equipped with new skills. So maybe we can make collaboration with private sectors as well. So, but this is really not an easy easy task. So maybe we can first with the organizations and global leaders having consensus on the need for turning this big idea into global action.
Thank you very much. Another question from the audience from Beyond. Go ahead. Hello.
Me?
Yes.
Hello. Hello.
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. Yeah, so the idea of HTHD is very interesting, but I'm concerned that usually people's learning capacity will decline as age. Usually it's become more and more difficult for like old age people to adopt the new technology or digital technology. So my concern is by using HTHD, will this technology enlarge the like digital divide, especially for those old age people? And what kind of policies or measures could be adopted to shrink such a possible divide? Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's really a good point. Yeah, I agree that if we want to embrace new digital technologies, the beneficiaries are mainly youths rather than aged people. But you know that given that the youths have much longer period for learning compared to the old aged people with a much short learning period. So maybe you can prioritize youths for making them to benefit from new technologies, digital learning. But I don't mean that we really have to neglect those old aged people. So I agree that we really have to be more active in making people, aged people technologies. But you know that in recent years, we saw very interesting development like gamification and other interesting digital technologies motivating those who are really not interested in or not able to utilize digital tools. So the digital tools are becoming more accessible even to old aged people with much better interfaces. So maybe that's another interesting area that the technology should contribute. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time for one more question from Sitaram. Please go ahead, Sitaram.
Thank you very much, John. Professor, it was an enlightening presentation. I actually want to ask your comment to this observation, which is quite prevalent, and this is in Asia. There is a competition with the school-based education vis-a-vis private tutorial, which has become a huge business, competing or maybe even dwarfing the public school-based education. It is even so dominant in the developed countries like Japan, Korea, and Singapore. What are your views on it? Why is it so?
Yeah, I think that is a really insightful question. And I have been wrestling with this question for years. And you know that maybe high-touch, high-tech can help this private tutoring system to transform itself to become edutech industry that are able to collaborate with schools. So that means that you really have to make schools to embrace those innovators in private sector, not just the innovators with the old pedagogies like we have in cram schools, like Juku in Japan and Hagwon in Korea. Maybe the new players in private sector in Asian region is edutech innovators, entrepreneurs. Maybe the old private tutoring sector can be transformed into a new private sector that are more innovative, more willing to collaborate with schools. So the policymakers, teachers, educators, maybe should change their mindset to embrace them and to work together with them. That could be, I think, really important change that we really have to have for the high-touch, high-tech or whatever innovation in this area.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Lee, for your excellent answers. We had a lot of time for discussion, so that's much appreciated. We've come to the end of the session now, and I would like to just ask maybe Didi Kim to say some words, and then Dean Sanovic to conclude.
Thank you very much for question. Very, insightful. Always, as always, insightful the lecture. So actually, ADBI also we are struggling with the surrounding issues, how to deal with the kind of the divide, digital divide or other divide situation, especially with regard to COVID-19 situation. So I think in this cases or education is very paramount to overcome this kind of the divide in technology and also the inequalities and so on. So in this sense, you're mentioning about the high tech, high touch will be really important. I think one issue is how to mobilize the necessary resources. You mentioned the infrastructure device and also the teaching of teachers and so on. So in this case also your education commission will be playing a good role, playing a large role. So I think your evaluation of the Vietnam cases also should be applicable to other countries. So that the European countries also scale up this kind of the embracing of new technology in response to coronavirus, also the development of the in this case, very much nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Your presentation was really insightful, informative. And also your last comment in response to different questions that raised as numerous. So that comment reminded us that the other issues are improving the efficiency and improvement of liquidity. The trade-off is the issue. So the way to get the private sector may be faster by the gap in education. So that's problem. So we are thinking about we need a very strong leadership of leaders. But at the same time, we have to be able to ask the decision making of strong leaders. So in that sense, IDEA is also going to continue to focus on this issue and maybe very serious issue. And the organization is not only KDI school, but also is a very organization. So it's not really a formal organization, but more volunteer from the leaders. To make more goals. So we need so I will work on the way. Thank you very much for your